Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia. This is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
Hello, my sweetness. So you caught me in the middle of making my cocktail.
Oh,
Tell me.
interesting.
Yes, I'm getting olives out of the. I'm trying to transfer the chametz sticker stuff back to the refrigerator. Um, does do olives do green olives go into tonic and gin?
If you like it, it goes in the gin. That's what I've kind of noticed with alcohol. Like they have this whole thing about like wine, and all these wine connoisseurs went ahead and like bought these like they thought were like really old vintage bottles of wine, and then they were told later on after they praised these bottles of wine that it was just some like box wine out of like nowhere. So like
That's funny.
it's all like it's all like up to you. That's
Yeah.
why it's like, some people like that nice Genesee Cabernet Sauvignon. Like it's like a $10 bottle of wine, but it tastes great. I personally love it. It's a nice semi-dry, semi-sweet wine. Um, it's good to go. But others feel
Well, here
like,
are the olives. So I'm going to put one in my gin and tonic and eat the other.
all right, if you like that taste, then gesund to hate. Um, so my thing is, this week was Yom HaShoah. Did that ever have any significance when you were in your teens? Because for me, I'm understanding Yom HaShoah like it's something that, of course, is very important, and they did it on the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. But we already have Tisha B'Av to commemorate the tragedies that happened to us, and Nisan's supposed to be more of a positive month. So it's like, for me, I feel like it's better for Yom HaShoah to be on Tish B'Av and try to have other, positive commemorations of Jewish history in Nisan.
Well, to the whole idea of the Holocaust studies and Yom HaShoah, that this is something that's fairly recent. When I was in school, the Holocaust was virtually ignored. The only attention that was given to it in our history books was one little paragraph. Oh, yes, and 6 million Jews were wiped out in Europe. Boom, that was it. This whole business of actually studying the Holocaust and giving it emphasis is something that's fairly recent. I don't want to say, I guess would say within the past, it has to be within the past maybe 30 years or so.
Really, that
Um,
recent?
yeah, it's pretty recent now. But the Rebbe, by the way, did not like Holocaust studies, and he did not like the emphasis on the Holocaust because he felt it gave a lot of especially young Jewish people the wrong message, that this is what it means to be Jewish,
Yeah.
is to be slaughtered, and he did not like that emphasis. I'm not so crazy about Holocaust studies myself because my fear, I'm paranoid. My fear is that Jew haters will study the Holocaust to find out what went wrong
I
and
mean,
maybe to correct the situation in the future.
the only thing that went wrong was because Hitler was running like a three-sided war, and he put all his efforts into killing Jews more than trying to win a war. That was the truth. The
Yeah.
reason why it failed was because they wanted it to succeed. You know, and there's all these stories that I remember being taught as a kid about, like, we're like dust to the earth. So when you stomp out dust, dust just rises and covers the shoe. So every time someone tries to knock us down, we're just going to rise up and take over.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I don't, that's why I don't care about the need to teach Holocaust, stories and Holocaust information, because A, people
Mm-hmm.
that need to know don't care. B, people that already know. And C, the whole idea of Holocaust remembrance and things like that. The reason why it was such a big significance was because in a 6-year span, half of the Jewish population was destroyed. but that wasn't the only time half the population of the Jewish population was destroyed. There was also, everyone says the Spanish Inquisitions. You had the pogroms. You had, multiple times throughout history of Jews being oppressed. We even celebrate times when Jews were oppressed and then were successfully not oppressed. And the weird thing that came out of the Holocaust Remembrance and Yom HaShoah and things like that, from when I'm understanding it, is like glorifying victimhood, and the bigger victim you are, the more you win. And that kind of bothers me, because it's like there's so much more to Yiddishkeit and Judaism that we don't need to celebrate morbidly celebrate like our victimhood.
Commemorate. It's more commemorate, I think, is the word that you're more looking for.
Yeah.
I tell you, there's nothing wrong in saying the course, if a class is studying World War II history, yes, that the Holocaust should be studied in conjunction with studying the history of World War II. But to have a total emphasis, a total separate Holocaust studies per se, this is kind of sick. I agree with you. It's not. I don't think this is mentally healthy.
I think it's a morbid curiosity. I think it's a morbid curiosity, and it's also this idea thinking that we can prevent it from happening again. And I think it's like the reality is that until Mashiach comes, we're always going to be on our toes. And you might think of every single possible way to avoid something negative from happening. Like on a personal level, it's very good. Stay vigilant, 100%. I agree on a personal level. Definitely watch the news, have your passport ready. Like, hey, like be vigilant. But on a larger scale, I don't think it's really needed and necessary. Not because I don't believe it's going to happen again. No, I believe it is going to happen again. So it doesn't matter if we're going to study this stuff. It really doesn't. We put all this effort into it. We do all these, nice cry videos of all this stuff that's happening. No one's going to care.
There's also something else too, that there's how can I say it? There's a more constructive way to deal with the tragedy like the Holocaust. And the most constructive suggestion I ever saw was in Baltimore. I think in the 1980s, they wanted to make a Holocaust memorial downtown.
Yeah.
And somebody said, look, we're putting thousands of dollars, maybe $1 million, into this stupid little memorial. He says, what? So the vagrants can, sleep on it, or, sleep around it, or, whatever, do whatever they want to do around it in downtown Baltimore. And this person who wrote this letter said, the best Holocaust memorial would be if every Jewish couple would pledge to have one more child than what they were planning on, and name that child after someone who perished in the Holocaust.
I agree.
I thought that was such a great suggestion. I mean, if we, one time your father said something about the generation of the Holocaust dying for Judaism. And he said, our generation, where we saw the big Baal Tshuva movement.
Yeah.
Your father said to somebody, I forgot who your father was talking to, but your father said, what they died for, we should live for.
Yeah. That's the whole point of what we're talking about, is that like, there's more a focus on how Jews died from like 39 to 45 than how Jews lived from the time of Avram Avinu to today. Like our life, like it's kind of frustrating because people have this morbid curiosity about death. And I've read all these books about like people love dead Jews kind of thing, where it's like they'll glorify our death, but when it comes to our living, they'll either ignore it or hate it. And that's what bothers me, because we're putting all this effort into like commemorating all this death that happened to us. What about all the time commemorating like, hey, make sure everybody has matzah and for Pesach? How about making sure people have candles for Shabbos? How about making sure people have challah for Shabbos? How about people making sure, you put on tefillin? How about making sure like all of that as a commemoration as Jews? That's what we're supposed to be doing. It's and that's where I get frustrated, because it's just like, we have Tisha B'Av to focus on all the morbidity in Jewish history, but we don't need to add more. I don't want to say negativity, because I don't think that's going to translate very well, but we have enough tragedy in our calendar that we don't need to add another tragedy in our calendar.
I agree with
know?
the totally, yeah.
Like
Mhm.
we can add that. We can. I'm not saying tack it on because it's just, oh, another one on the board. Like, it's the most recent horrific tragedy, but it's not something we necessarily need to bring to the table for other people to just not care about. Like, it's, and this is what really gets me. This is what really is bothering me this whole time, is that, like, just for this Yom HaShoah, they took a cattle car, replicated cattle car that was going to go to Auschwitz. They replicated it, put it in Times Square with, all these stories of people that who died and survived throughout the Holocaust. They put it in Times Square. How many people do you think really went inside there and actually cared and noticed it, compared to the amount of people who just didn't notice it or didn't care even when they noticed it? And compare that to how much effort was put in to making that exact replica with digital, like, media and all that stuff. Like, you put in all this money, time, and effort for something that, like, I know is very important and
Yeah.
I care about as a Jew. I care
Mhm.
about this immensely, but as, like, a regular human being, it's just, they're gonna put on their blind eyes. They don't care. It's like, looking, like, I think I had a discussion with you. I don't know if it was on the podcast or we were just talking.
Yeah.
We're talking about, like, the cobalt mines, that are being dug up right now with all these tragic, slaves that are working there, or your regular, phone that's being used, and how it was made. It was like this. Louis C.K. had a whole joke about it. He's like, "Oh, we just put pain and suffering and threw it at it, and no one ever gave a shit." Like, that was the whole point. No one, like, I'm not mad at the person who wants to have Yom HaShoah and wants to put the cattle car in Times Square. I'm mad at the fact that even though they're doing that and putting in so much time and effort, it's being wasted.
Yes. They could put all that money could be better spent creating scholarships for poor Jewish kids whose parents cannot afford to send them to a Jewish school, to a
And
private Jewish school.
on
Yeah.
top of all of that, what about all the Holocaust survivors who are still living paycheck to paycheck,
Yes.
or barely, like, can afford anything?
Well, then there's, there are Holocaust. I get notices about Holocaust survivors that are still in the Ukraine, that are struggling through this war, that have no heat in the middle of
Yeah.
the winter because of this, horrible war that's being waged. And I wonder to myself sometimes, have people really learned from it? I don't think so. There was a friend of mine whose mother was a Holocaust survivor from Hungary. Do you remember the war in it was Bosnia?
I think so.
Right.
Vaguely.
And Serbia. It was Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, with that area of Moldova, that
Moldova.
of what used to be Yugoslavia. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was a horrible war. I think it was in the early 90s. It took place, and it showed that how I don't know, I have trouble figuring out who was fighting who. I think it was Christians against Muslims or something, the Serbs against the Christians. I don't know how it went, but one side actually had cattle cars. They did during World War II, and they were putting the victims of the opposing side, women and children, in these cattle cars and taking them basically to concentration camps. And so this friend of mine whose mother survived was looking at there were magazines in this country that showed pictures of these cattle cars with the inscription, has, does this look familiar to anybody? And when she saw that picture, she jumped up and yelled into the picture, "Now it's your turn to ride in the cattle cars."
So basically, those are the ones that, like, shoved her in there.
She felt it was like, yeah, just retribution, that now it was their turn.
Yeah.
The goyim who were responsible for the Holocaust, our church on the right, and the cat. That's how she felt about it. And you look around the world, like, I don't think anybody learned from it. I
No.
really don't. I don't think anybody
No.
learned from it.
The only
And
thing.
yeah, there's I remember when I lived in Crown Heights, it was really sad. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in the Black community when I was living in Crown Heights. Probably still is in New York.
Mhm.
And I remember when I would walk down the street, when there were, Jews that would walk down the street, I'd walk down the street. I hate to say it, I'm not trying to say racist, but this is exactly how it happened. These Black youths were coming out of the high school around where I lived. And when they would see a Jew, they would yell, "Heil Hitler!" And they would like taunt us about the Holocaust. Hey, you should have killed more of them.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody learned from it.
No one learned from it at all. The frustrating thing I see in Jews is that there's this feeling like they think someone else listens to us, someone else can listen to us, and they can care about us, and it's not just us, and we're not alone. But I hate to say this, we're alone. We are alone in this world. We are strangers among strangers. Like it says it in the Torah. We are Goyim among Goyim. We are like nations among nations. We are always going to be the stranger. That is why we have to be so respectful to people that are strangers in strange lands. We have to be respectful to immigrants. We have to be respectful to converts, because we also are immigrants. We also are converts. We also are people that, are strangers, that we're never going to be comfortable. And it's like people have this delusion where they think that, oh, maybe if I do this, they'll like me. Maybe if I do that, they'll like me. Maybe if I do that, they'll care about me. It's like not everybody saved Jews and had them in attics during the Holocaust. A lot of them didn't. A lot of them reported them. And as a matter of fact, Hungary was the number one place to kill Jews, and it was never invaded by Nazi Germany. So it's like it just
when Eichmann was in Hungary, he was responsible for the main transport.
Yeah,
that was his assignment.
And Germany never really invaded Hungary. Hungarians voluntarily gave up all of their Jews. That's what's so disgusting. It's like you hear these stories. I hear these stories ever since I was a kid, where it's like families have like maids or close friends or neighbors that aren't Jewish, and they're close friends with them, and they take them out and they do this stuff and they bond with them, blah, blah, blah. And then like right before like they leave or they go, or they're like they need some help, the neighbor just like curses them or tells them to shove off or whatnot. I heard these stories all the time.
Yeah.
It's like
I think the miracle though about the Holocaust, quite honestly, is as many people survived as did, that it's unbelievable that not everybody was wiped out. I mean, in that situation, you would have thought that everyone would have been wiped out. And it was amazing how there were some people who just survived. It was totally miraculously. And you hear those stories too about the survivors, how they managed to live through the Holocaust.
Because there was a will to them. I think I was reading, I think I've said this so many times on the podcast. Viktor Frankl, who survived, I think it was Auschwitz and Birkenau. I can't remember which. He survived, and he did a whole psychoanalysis of the survivors and the people who died. And the ones who survived were the ones that had some level of like hope and a meaning. And if you give it meaning, you can survive. If you don't have any meaning, you will die. And that's what happened a lot of times in the concentration camps. People lost hope. They didn't see an end to it, and they just died. Like that was the craziest thing, is that like the human will is what keeps you alive, and without it, you will literally die. And that's what Viktor Frankl was talking about in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. If you don't have a will, you will not wake up the next morning. And they also talked about, like if someone was having a nightmare in Auschwitz, you were told not to wake them, because it was better for them to have the nightmare than to wake up in that place
and to see the real nightmare.
Yeah, but that's the thing, Ima. That's the thing. It's just like what I think the Holocaust. Why I think people are attracted to it on a level is because, no offense, this was Western Europe. This is Western civilization Europe, and people consider themselves liberals and open-minded, and they were citizens of a civilized world, and they turned on their own citizens and put them in camps, isolated them, and killed them. So much so, the Jewish population was wiped out in half. And
I
it's
think it was
just
more. I think worldwide we lost 1/3 of our population worldwide.
no, there's 15 million. Okay, so there were, as far as I know, I need to double check the numbers. I'm just guessing.
I thought it was
Trying to
18
remember.
million at
It was
that before the
18 mil?
Holocaust.
18 million before?
And we lost they think, in fact, it might, they're guessing 6 million. It might have even been more.
There probably is more. That's why people say 6 million and one, because it's like it's the extra one where you're not even sure of.
But you mentioned something before though about the Holocaust, that one of the problems too about Holocaust memorials and Holocaust days and commemorating the Holocaust is you have a lot of non-religious Jewish people who figure, oh, okay, I went to a Holocaust memorial ceremony. Now I've done my part for Yiddishkeit. Rather than, hey, wait a minute, what about, like you said, putting on tefillin, keeping kosher, keeping Shabbos, really looking into the actual meat of Judaism. You do this little ceremonial thing and you feel like you've done your obligation.
Well, actually, people are getting more wise to that. I go on a lot of Jewish Instagram posts and Reddit communities, and it's not always religious people, but it's getting to a point where it's like everyone's kind of done obsessing over the morbidity of Jewish life. Let's celebrate our life. Let's enjoy it. That's why I was listening to this podcast with Michael Rappaport and Modi, two comedians. One's more of an actor, and Michael Rappaport said something that I totally agreed with. He hates the decrepit, like, woe is me Jew character. The Woody Allen character that, like, oh, it's terrible. I just don't know. I'm so nervous because my insides are just so crazy, and I just so, like, he was so much
the neurotic down.
It's just
downtrodden.
You know what's frustrating is that, like, he was saying that, like, they put him in. He played in a lot of movies, and he only was portrayed as a Jew in one movie. The rest of the time, he was never portrayed as a Jew because he's a tough Brooklyn, New York kind of guy. And people don't want to see a tough New York Jew. And I find that so frustrating. Where it's like, what? We have to be some kind of puppet, blah, 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 kind of poor schmuck? Like, that's what people want to see in us?
The Yiddish word is nebuchel.
A nebuch, yeah. They want to see a nebuch case. They want to see a nebuch case. And I hate seeing Jewish comedians lean into that. That pisses me off so much, because it's just like, dude, you are not doing any help to our people. You are making things worse, and you are just pushing us back years. And it's just like, it's nothing you can do, because it's just like it's like arguing on the internet is the most stupidest thing in the world. And that's what I'm comparing this to. It's like, you want to argue on the internet, you want to go ahead and explain everything and just rant and rave and you see somebody, for instance, talking about, like, oh, the Israeli soldiers are killing Palestinian kids and all they have is their stones to protect them. Like, dude, this guy literally raped and beheaded this 17-year-old girl. Okay, and he was like maybe 18, 19, so we call him that he was young. Like, shut up. Like these some of these people that kill Jews are not being depicted as like, oh, they were just children, they didn't know, they come from families, like, they're struggling. You have to understand. They have no choice.
It's even worse. They're pictured as freedom fighters.
But you know what? I've been seeing this. I'm turning 35 tomorrow. I've seen this since I was in second grade. And you know what? Like, honestly, I don't see an end in sight. And then when I see these news, I see the news about, Israeli-Palestinian conflict or anything, I just don't care anymore, because there's no end. There's no end. And it's like, you just have to go ahead and do your Torah mitzvos, pray for Mashiach. You did your part. That's it. And that's how I feel with all these things.
I think there's something else too, like, as far as like the Israeli government is concerned, it's getting to the point where you the people in the Israeli government are either totally stupid or being paid off, because it's a constant cycle.
No, Ima,
They have a
they're
war.
not being paid off.
They get
Don't
the,
think,
no, they
Ima,
get
you are
the,
such a
listen,
conspiracy theorist.
listen, I listen to you. Listen to me a minute.
Ugh.
They have a war. They get the land. They give it back. They have another war. They take the land. They give it back. They have another war. They get the land. They give it back, and it's over and over. And people are just getting, hey, what the heck? I mean, what is your problem as far as the Israeli government is concerned? Stand up, be proud, take the land that's Israel, and that is it. And the heck with the rest of the world, what they think of us, big deal. We have to do what's best for us. Like the giving back of Gaza, that was horrendously horrible. What an idiotic, foolish thing to do. And one of the speculations of that was that there were certain people, who I will not mention their names, they're deceased though, who they found out had some sort of land money deal going on with Gaza, which is why they gave back Gaza, because they got certain payments. But then those people got a stroke a few weeks later and then died 5 years later, still in their comatose state.
Yeah, well, again, I know.
That person.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, is that it's just constant bullshit. That's like, what control did you have over Gaza? What control did you have over Gush Katif? What control did you have of any of that? It's like watching
like us. I mean, us as ordinary people.
Me and you.
Nothing.
What control exactly? So what can we really do to make a difference?
We're in the United States. We don't have an army. We don't have an army at our disposal. We don't have a Mossad or a CIA. We're just ordinary citizens trying to live everyday lives.
That's the point, Ima. That's the point I'm trying to make. You have all these big stories happening, all these big stories taking place, and as just people are trying to find some kind of control that we have. The reality is we have zero control. We have zero control. We need to pray to God and hope everything works out and make sure we make the right decisions. But in general, we have nothing. And that's what the Holocaust, in my mind, taught us. That no matter how hard you try thinking that your neighbor's going to protect you, no matter how hard you try, you think you're so liberal, you think you're so this, you think you're so that, you think you're so well educated, you think you're so well protected because of this, that, it can be gone in a literal second. So all this education doesn't mean anything. All this understanding doesn't mean anything. All these talks don't mean anything. And it's just life is just gonna bulldoze through, and you just hope to God you get to survive it to the end. That's it.
That sounds so optimistic.
Come
on, we can be a little more optimistic than that now. I refuse to believe, though, that nobody has any control, because there are times, I'm sorry, I think we still have control of the ballot box. I think there are certain elements of control that we still have. There was one time, I forgot what Congress was going to do something. I forgot what it was. And it was during the time of Reagan. I forgot what they were going to do. They were going to do some sort of stupid move. They were all going to do it. So Ronald Reagan got on the airwaves that night and said, everybody call your congressional representative and let him or her know what you think of this bill that they're about to vote yes on. The next day, when they took the vote, there were Congress people who had committed themselves to voting for this bill. And when they did the roll call, they said, I know I'm really committed to voting for this bill, but I got so many calls last night from my constituency that I have to vote no. And the bill didn't pass because enough people got on the phones and called their congressional. What gets me upset is that people throw in the towel too quickly. I was telling this woman there was something they were going to do in Maryland. I think they were going to eliminate some sort of insurance coverage for state employees, which would have affected us very much because your father worked for the state of Maryland, for the government. And so I was talking to the neighbors, please call our state representatives and tell them not to eliminate insurance coverage for their government employees. This affects my husband. So I called, and a few of my neighbors said, yeah, they would call. One of my neighbors says, I don't know. I'm not an activist. That's not being an activist. That's exercising your right as an American citizen to call your elected representative to tell them this is how you feel about this vote that's coming up. I'm not an activist. I don't know how many times you heard people with that whiny voice. I don't know. The minute I hear that, I don't know. Come on, give me a break. Get some. I don't want to say the word balls, but get some gumption about yourself. Come on.
No, look. I'm not saying giving up. I'm saying there's only so much control you have in this world. I think that's where like anger comes from and like the frustration. And I think, voting is one thing, calling your senator or congressman is another, and getting to a point where you're screaming blue in the face. I mean, I don't want to be really, really pessimistic here, but I'm going to bring it up. Protesting the Vietnam War for 20 years, at some point finally, came through. But the Iraqi War, people protested from the beginning, and they still follow through with what they have and dealt with. Same thing with Afghanistan.
Wait a minute, the Iraqi War. You mean the one against Saddam Hussein?
The second one, yes. There was plenty of protests for the Iraqi War.
But they were not as much as from Vietnam. As Vietnam wore on, more and more people protested it because, people were dying, money was being spent on it, and eventually, in the beginning, people were protesting as a matter of principle. They said this was an immoral war. But then, as it went on, you got the middle of the road people who really usually don't get involved in politics, who got very fed up and said, how long is this stupid war going to go on for? How many people are going to die? How much money is going to be spent? And they're not doing anything to win it.
But they're
just stalemating it. Like, come on, either win it or pull out. Stop
but
this
that's
nonsense.
The thing. But that's the thing with Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. They were fighting an infinite war. The Vietnamese were fighting to survive, as well as the Afghanis in Iraq. So with them, they had no problem waking up in the morning and fighting to survive. As well as in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Palestinians think the Israelis are some kind of colonizers that are going to give up. They don't understand this is our only out. This is our homeland, and this is the only place that we can call safe. We are going to do this and work on this to survive. So the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will be a constant state until Mashiach comes, because both sides are trying to survive. And that's why America lost all three of those wars, because they were trying to win them, not trying to survive them. And that was the point.
You're wrong about one thing. They weren't out to, the only war that they were out to win, well, besides World War II, was the first what was it? The Gulf War.
First Gulf War.
Yeah, with Storm and Norman,
Yeah.
Norman Schwarzkopf. That was a very well-run war. That was it was the first time an all-volunteer army actually came in, and that was done in like 2 months. They came in, they had a good strategy, they won it, and then they had a very good, exit strategy, which is the way, a war should be fought. It was very organized, was very done.
And how did that work out for them? They went back again.
No, the problem was this. There was an interview with George Sr., and they asked him if he regretted not. The problem is that they didn't want to take over. What is it? I forgot. I think they didn't want to take over Iran or something. They wanted to stay.
They were in Kuwait, right?
They were in Kuwait, and they should have stayed there. And George Bush Sr. was advised not to do it because it looks like we're warmongering, might say.
Yeah.
So they asked him years later how he felt about that advice. He said, well, unfortunately, he said that looking back now, he says he realized he followed bad advice about that.
But Ima, that's my point.
And then his son came in the second time to finish the job.
And did he finish the job, or did he create ISIS? He created a power vacuum and had ISIS come in. That's what the point I'm trying to make in the first place, that it's an infinite war there. They're living and like breathing this stuff. And America thinks it's going to be one of those, oh, I go in, I take over, I conquer, I win, I go ahead and establish my own government and leave. These people aren't playing that game, and America still thinks that they have to play that game. That's the frustrating point. Is that like, like it's just constant, I don't know, stupid decisions. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. I had so many other things I was going to talk about that like I still haven't hit. And we're like we got like 4 minutes left of the podcast.
Well, that's like life itself.
Yeah.
So many things you wanted to do and didn't get a chance.
And that's fine with me. That's fine with me. It is what it is. You work
That's
so
what makes
hard for
life
something.
exciting. Maybe that, maybe what makes life so exciting is not having total control of it. Imagine how boring
That's what I just said. That's what I just said.
You had total control of everything.
That's what I was saying this whole time, and you were disagreeing with me. That's my point. Like, it's just
I was
whatever.
saying that I don't want to be totally pessimistic that we have no control, because I remember what frustrated me growing up. My mother was raised by two people who were pogrom survivors.
Yeah.
And the good old Eastern Jewish European optimistic attitude was, what's gonna be is gonna be, and you can't change it. And that would get me so angry, because I was raised in the United States, where we are told that yes, you can change things if you work hard enough at it. And I would say that's not true.
But that is an American thing, though. You know that, right? Like, only in America is there like so much confidence that you can do things. Like, that's what people like are jealous of America on some level, where it's like there's a lot of confidence. Like, we're not like we're not the smartest, in the bunch, but we are the most confident. And I guess
America succeeds despite itself.
What's funny is that's very true. That's
America
very true.
In spite of itself.
In spite of itself.
We have a lousy education system, not that well organized.
School shootings.
We're reactors, not initiators. But once we react, but the Rebbe said, remember what the Rebbe said about what keeps this country afloat is the fact that we have in God we trust on our coinage.
Yeah.
As long as we have that on our coinage, we'll be okay.
Well, are we going to have in God we trust on our cryptocurrency?
Yeah, that's interesting. What is cryptocurrency?
So we literally have a minute and a half left, so I'm not going to go into the whole complexities of it. But basically what it is how like you can go ahead and say, for instance, this dollar is worth $1 American. Why? Because the Federal Reserve's yada yada backs it. With cryptocurrency, I guess it's more than just that it backs it. It's also there's a legitimacy of it. Like, I'm barely understanding cryptocurrency. Like,
is cryptocurrency like not actual money that you can touch, but more like virtual money on like computerized virtual money or something?
Okay, we have a minute left, but I'll tell you this. When you get paid, right, it goes into your bank account, right? And then you buy from Amazon, right? And you pay with your Amazon, right? Did you ever pick up a dollar?
No.
That's the point. That's what cryptocurrency basically is doing. It's going to get to a point where everything is going to be digitized. The fear of it all is that that's a lot of control that someone could have if they know what they're doing, if they can hack into cryptocurrency and whatnot. And they could topple banks and things like that. Like, it's a real issue. So people are being very careful and cautious about it. We got less than a minute left, but it's been real, it's been nice, and it's been real nice. Have a wonderful Shabbos, Ima.
Love you. Have a good Shabbos. Mwah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.